Hi, welcome to another episode of Very Interesting with me, Chris Mejia. Thank you so much for listening. I'm here with another pre-recorded intro since we recorded this episode earlier in the year. I'm so excited for y'all to hear this episode. I have yet another fascinating discussion with a guest. My guest this week is Danny Meyerend, local comedian who does comedy all across the Pacific Northwest, as well as just recently hit the road opening for the one and only Zack Fox. Danny, I have him on because he is also a PhD graduate from the Media and Communication Department at University of Michigan, where he was studying the intersections of race, media, and technology, specifically focusing on Black identity and racial formation in the U.S. I have Danny on because his dissertation is absolutely very interesting. I'm sorry to say that. I know it's way too on the nose, but I feel like it's weird if I don't do it at least once. But his dissertation, Whose Black Is It Anyways? Television, Competing Claims, and Conditions of Possibility in the Black Digital Poplar. I have him on to talk about not only that, but the realm of academia, pursuing your PhD, what that experience is like, and overall conducting research between the connection of media and racial identity in the U.S. We largely focus on a specific article in his dissertation that is named The Algorithm Knows I'm Black from Users to Subjects. I can't wait for y'all to hear it. We just scratched the surface, and there's just so much more fascinating things about his dissertation. If you want to read his dissertation, it's available online. I will have the links in the description of the episode if you want to go through and read that. And if you want to support Danny and see him perform live comedy, you can do that by going to his Instagram at danny.meyerend on Instagram and TikTok, where he will have his link tree linking up to upcoming shows. He'll be at Laughs Comedy Club July 26th to the 27th. And as well as be performing at the Hereafter on July 31st. And then if you like me, you can follow me at Chris Mejia Comedy on Instagram and TikTok, at Topher Mejia on Twitter and Twitch. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Seriously, I so greatly appreciate all of you who listen and watch and share with your friends. Seriously, it absolutely means the world. This has been a dream project of mine, so I thank you for it. And please, if you can hit follow on the podcast, subscribe if it's on YouTube, give it a thumbs up, give it a 5 stars rating. Seriously, it helps me out so much when you do little things like that. But without further ado, the third episode of Very Interesting. Hey everybody, welcome to Very Interesting with Chris Mejia. It's your boy, Chris Mejia, and it's been hasn't been a minute for you because in your knowledge, we've released every week, but it's been a minute for me, and we're back. Super exciting episode. Our guest today is a comic here in Seattle, does shows all over, but also has something that a lot of comics don't, schooling. Our comic here today is a PhD individual, a doctor, and whose doctorate and dissertation we're actually going to talk about today. Please give it a lot of love to the very funny and the very educated Danny Meyerend, everybody. Thank you so much for being on the pod.
I'm excited to do this, man. I appreciate you, yeah.
Does it feel like, do you ever feel like better than people when you're at like mics and shit and you're just like, bitch, I have a PhD?
You know what's crazy? As soon as you started that sentence, I knew it was gonna end with, do you feel better than people? And I'm not gonna lie. Yes.
Well, because it's
a little bit.
A PhD is like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Any sort of, okay, let me back up.
Yeah.
You don't need college. It's kind of a scam.
It is.
But like, I'm half and half because I'm like, college is a scam, but I'm also like an advocate for education.
Sure.
Especially anyone who isn't white. Like, no matter if you Black, Asian, brown, whatever. I always advocate for like, get educated, because that's what, not to please white people, but like to get a step over them.
Yeah.
But that being said, I've like most people, bachelor's, master's is a really, like, I mean, getting a bachelor's is already a big feat.
Sure. Yeah.
Master's, same thing, but like doctorate is not just like you went to school and study. Like, it usually comes with like Like, for example, with yours, you had to do
Oh, okay.
yeah, anxiety, more loans.
Yeah.
So like with yours, so actually let's you have a doctorate. Well, first off, you have a master's in English.
Master's in English, yeah.
Which you got at Idaho State University.
Right.
And
terrible
then
decision.
I mean,
Idaho, I'm saying, was a terrible decision.
Oh yeah,
Idaho,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Boise's kind of lit.
This was not Boise.
Oh, where's
this was Pocatello, Idaho?
Oh yeah, that's a terrible decision.
Yeah.
That's a terrible decision. But then you got a doctorate, your recent doctorate in correct me if I'm wrong, communication and media.
Yep.
At the University of Michigan. Go Blue! Congrats
Go
on
Blue.
the national championship.
That's right.
But when getting your doctor to actually officially be like, I have my doctorate, like it's not just like, oh, I took my classes, took the test, and that's it.
It's so fucking stressful. It's basically like there's a 3-part process.
Yeah.
You do your coursework, right? That's usually 2 to 3 years. Then you take something called your preliminary exams,
Right.
Which is basically they make you read a shit ton of things in your like areas of expertise,
Right.
And then they're like, now spit all of this back at us and show us that you are well educated in your like niche area.
Got it.
So you do that. If you pass, cool.
Uh-huh.
Then the final stage is dissertation.
Right.
So you usually write like a 30-page, they call it a prospectus, which is like an outline of this is what my dissertation is going to be. You have to defend that. Then once that defense gets okayed, now you write your 200-page dissertation. And
Got
then
it.
you defend that, and then they tell you, okay, make some revisions, do whatever. You do it. Hopefully it gets passed. Now you're a doctor.
So defend that as in like basically this panel reads it and just basically tries to. Is it that they're trying to refute you and prove you wrong, but more of challenging, like obviously probably like questioning like sources, things like that.
Yeah.
But like, are they also challenging the strategy and theories and thinking that you're doing to fully evaluate if you're understanding what you're putting out?
I'll say this. At its best, a dissertation defense is, we really like these ideas. Tell us more about how you came to these conclusions, and let's sharpen them together.
Okay.
Right?
So it's not really them trying to work, like bring you down.
Now, hold on. Because at its worst,
Right.
it is that.
Right.
You'll have a committee of professors who are like, you know what? We gonna fuck him up today.
Right.
It's like, we're gonna do our best to be like, what about this? What about this? This was a bad idea. This was a bad decision. Why didn't you include this source? This framing is off. And all of a sudden you're like, this was my life's work.
Right.
And you just shit on it.
Right.
But if you have good advisors, they'll get you to a spot where when you're defending, for the most part, you're good.
Uh-huh.
And so the conversation, you're not worried about like, oh shit, I don't know if this is gonna pass. If you've been in good contact with your professors, they'll let you know.
Right.
You're ready to defend. But sometimes professors don't do that, and they're like, oh yeah, go ahead, defend it.
Oh.
And then it just doesn't go well.
And if you go to defend it and you don't do a good job, is that like failed, or you have to keep doing that until they pass you?
you keep running it back.
Oh,
Until
okay.
they're like, now it's good enough.
So theoretically, if you do your dissertation early, like if you were quote unquote ready earlier than what normally it takes, you could finish your doctorate sooner?
You could.
Okay.
There's people like in the U.S., I feel like, especially in my field, which is more, it's like humanities with a little bit of social science energy, 4 to 6 years.
Right.
And 4 years is on the early side.
Right.
If you finish in 4, it's like, I don't know how
You're a
you
prodigy.
Yeah, you're a prodigy.
Okay.
I took 6. 6.5. But I like saying 6.
Listen, anyone who's going to give shit about the amount of time it took to get a doctorate when you got a doctorate,
True.
like...
Yeah. I also say this, though. I have friends who ask me, like, yo, Danny, should I do a PhD? No. I tell everyone no. It's honestly, I'm happy. I did it.
Right.
And it happened, and I did learn some good things along the way. All in all, unless you really want to be a professor, or you have like a research area in mind that you know you want to do that for the rest of your life.
Right.
Other than that, don't do a PhD.
Right.
It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
Well, because, I mean, that's actually... So that's the half of me that advocates for education. That's what actually bums me out because of how expensive education is in this country. Like, getting a doctorate, I mean, is fucking stressful. but like even just like getting a master's or a bachelor's, like you just like you said, it's either A, to get a job, or B, to, I mean, research is also a job, but like to lead into something that you're wanting to do career wise.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it eliminates the possibility to just like, I just want to get educated on some shit.
Yes.
That is interesting to me.
Yeah.
So it probably adds to that stress where it's like,
bit.
I'm spending all this money I need to pass, and I need this to get whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Now, I will say this. My PhD, thankfully, I didn't pay a dime.
Oh, congratulations.
It was free.
Yeah.
Which is like one of the things I was considering, because there's some programs where you get a full fellowship, which is what I got.
Yeah.
So I got like a 5-year fellowship, and then I applied basically for like this special grant thing that gave me a 6th year funding where I could finish.
Hell yeah.
Some places, though, will give you some funding and then be like, you have to raise, like you have to apply for grants.
Right.
To like basically fill out the rest of your term. Don't do that.
Okay.
I would have not done this PhD if they told me to take out loans or come out of pocket.
Right.
That is 100% not worth it.
Yeah.
Do not go in debt to get a PhD.
Yeah.
But thankfully, they gave me like a fellowship. They gave me health insurance. But you are broke, though.
Right.
They gave me, they call it a stipend. You want to guess how much money they gave me a year to live off of?
It's probably like, okay, it's how frequent does the stipend get delivered?
You getting it basically once a month.
Once a month? So if I had to guess, it's probably 2 to 3K after taxes.
Correct.
Jesus.
Correct. Can you imagine?
Jesus.
Living off of $24K a year.
It's
crazy.
My first, so my day job is in like advertising and marketing. And my first job straight out of college, I moved here for it. It was an assistant media planner, and I was making like, I think like 33, 35K in Seattle. And like looking back, I'm like, how the fuck was I not like in a broke house? I mean, I have lots of credit card debt, so like that's how I got by.
Same.
But it's just, it's shout out to Blake who
okay, he can relate. Okay.
He can relate. But yeah, that's like so it's like just the pressure of like you're trying to pass this thing.
Yeah.
But then on top of it, you are like stipend to stipend basically.
Yeah.
Just trying to survive while also taking the like mental and emotional toll that is I am going through this process, and it's so stressful. Because if a doctorate was easy, obviously anyone could do it.
Sure.
And like even like getting a like yes, there's some bachelor programs where it's like that's a fake diploma what you got.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like it's still for the most part, depending on what school you go to, it's a very tough thing to accomplish.
Right.
And a doctorate is way and even especially like a place like University of Michigan, which is a very prestigious school, where it's probably even harder than probably some other places.
There's levels for sure.
Which no, go ahead. You were just about to.
I was gonna say like there's levels to it, but to go back to a second for the stipend, right? Imagine like stipend, stress of just academia in general, classes, research. You're also teaching. Like you're teaching undergrad classes as a part of your PhD.
Oh,
so for like my first 3 years, I'm teaching undergrad.
So they tell you,
classes.
hey, while you're studying, clock in.
Work. They say, get to fucking work. It's like they are. Well, I guess I got my diploma now. They are fucking you over.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Right.
And it's just like, shout out to Michigan. We have a union. And we've like.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, which is dope. We got a graduate student union. So we're like on strike every other year. Basically being like, y'all got to pay us a living wage.
Right.
Because y'all are working us.
Right.
Like faculty. And we not getting faculty benefits.
Right.
So shout out to them for like bargaining and doing all that stuff, even though they're getting more money now. Not when I was there.
Yeah.
There's been an increase now, and I'm like, I'm happy for y'all, but I feel myself getting real conservative. I feel it. You know, you talk to people about student debt, and they're like, back in my day, brother, I paid off $72K. And
how did you what turned you to being Republican? I advocated for the younger generation, and they got the benefits.
Yeah. I'm trying to be happy, but it's tough. I feel it creeping up.
It's tough when you're like, it's tough when you don't get to see the seeds that you sowed.
Yeah.
Which, like, obviously you do that because at the end of the day, you're trying to make the world a better place, whether you get to get those benefits or not.
For sure.
But it is like, yo, y'all weren't out here picketing or
Yeah.
doing whatever y'all did with the strike.
Yeah.
And it's like cool, now it's better for the future classes.
Mm-hmm.
But like that doesn't erase. It's always tough because as humans it's hard to, and justifiably so, it's tough to like separate. I had to go through that shit
Right.
while also being like, well, they shouldn't have to go through that shit.
Yeah. I think what would help, a check.
Yeah.
A check would help. If
Like a
Michigan-
post,
yeah,
like,
just
hey,
write me a
here,
little check and I'm like,
our
you know what?
bad, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take
like
it.
when Bumble recently has been like, our bad, and has
Yup.
been paying out
Yup.
people like that same. I feel that.
Just
I
cook
feel
me
that.
up. Like we out here rationing. Like just, you know what I'm saying? I need that.
So what led to you wanting to get a PhD in what you got a doctorate in?
Yeah. So it was, I think, a combination of two things. When I first got my master's in English, I, like right before that, I don't know if we've talked about, oh no, we did talk about this before. I was a youth pastor.
Right.
Right? So I was doing the pastor thing and it just wasn't sitting right for a number
Right.
of reasons, which could be a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. But long story short, it just wasn't connecting with me. I'm like, something's off. I go do a master's and I think I was still feeling some sort of, you know, like the Christian language of like, what's your calling?
Yeah.
Like you're called to do a specific thing.
What God has called, the
Yes.
purpose God has
Yes.
bestowed on you.
All of that. And so
Real quick. I'm looking at the camera right now. I know listeners, you can't notice. I just want to say, Danny and I, it's very weird because we both almost went to the same private Christian college. Shout out to Evangel University in Springfield, fucking Missouri. That's how
Missouri.
badly I wanted to leave Florida, where I was like,
that makes sense. though.
Springfield. And like I tried to make this a joke and it never worked out, but I'll never forget in that application, one of the sections was like, you know, you obviously had to talk about your relationship with God, going to church, all of that. And like one section was about the sins that you struggle with. So
No.
I talked on a college application. I talked about how I was jerking at the porn on a weekly, but then I was trying to downplay it.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, yo, it used to be real bad, but like I'm getting better.
Let's chill now.
I'm getting better.
Let's chill
We
now.
got Safe Search.
Wait, real quick, just another quick pivot. Have you ever heard of something called Covenant Eyes? You know what this is?
No.
It was a software developed by like Christian developers.
Right.
It basically was like they put an app on your phone and laptop, and if you watched porn, it sent a notification to your accountability partner. Which is crazy. Can you imagine? You get a text from Pastor Tim. He's like, hey, brother, 11:06 last night.
Hey, Joshua, why is it that you were looking up mommy milkers
Yes.
at 10:42 a.m. On Sunday? You were at church. I saw you. You were
Yeah.
in the pews. You were looking at me on stage. How were you still That's crazy.
Crazy. And that was a real thing. And like it was encouraged. You want to be like stronger in your faith? Covenant Eyes.
That, you know, it's funny when
Yeah.
I was in my youth group church days. I mean, also I was in puberty, so I think that
Yeah,
obviously
that's
played a role.
for sure.
But like, I feel like because it was so you shouldn't do it. When I would finally watch porn, when I would break down and give in into the temptation, I feel like I consumed so much of it in one sitting.
Valid.
Whereas now as an adult and I've allowed myself to be like live my life and I don't live by that anymore. Like if I watch porn for efficiency, like I just go on like the subreddits that I know I like and just watch the few that I like gifs that I need to see, and then I'm crank it out and then I'm out the door.
Yeah.
Like it's very much rarely is it like which, you know, everyone should, you know,
Yeah.
every now and then
What you gotta do.
you should have a self-pleasuring session where the purpose is to really treat yourself. But sometimes you're like, I'm trying to go to sleep.
I'm not gonna lie. The phrase self-pleasuring session, I didn't
Makes
love
it sound psychotic. It does make it sound a little psychotic.
I didn't love it.
It's definitely, that's jail time. You're right. You're right. But anyway, sorry. Continue.
We got a little off track, which is fine. Anyway, Christian stuff calling.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm still trying to figure out how can I do something that's not church related, not being a pastor, but still feels like adjacent to a calling. And to me, like getting a PhD, teaching in the classroom, educating people, mentorship with students, it felt close enough.
Right.
So I think there was honestly like just some guilt in me for leaving the church, and I was like, but I gotta figure out something.
Right.
And it's what I used to tell my mom, who is still a pastor right now.
Well, because it's also like you probably also felt like you spent so much time honing in on this skill of mentoring and teaching.
Yeah.
That it felt like if you did a complete 180 into something else, not saying like this is what that would have been, but like I'm sure, because I feel like I've recently talked to a lot of homies about them going through pivots and stuff, where it's like you almost feel like, was all of that for nothing? When it's like, no, life goes through phases, and you're allowed to have a phase where it's like, this was what I was meant to do during this period of time, and then that comes to an end. Just
Hard
like how
to accept that though sometimes.
Yes.
That's and especially when you're, well, actually maybe it is easier when you're younger, because you have like a sense of like hope.
Right.
And like perspective, like, oh, I could pivot and it's fine. Whereas
Right.
you're 40 years old, you're like, damn, I don't know anymore.
And you're like, I don't want to do an entry level position somewhere else, and then pride and ego starts to set in. But you were talking to your mom.
Yes, I was talking to my mom, and what I told her, because this is a black churchy woman who's a pastor, and I'll be like, Ma, I'm like, I never stopped preaching. My pulpit just changed. And she was like, hey, that was kind of some heat. He said that was some heat.
I mean, listen, some heat. That's a banger.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where, as a parent, you're like, you stupid, but that's
kind of,
that's okay.
Yeah, and that got her on board. That got her on board. And so yeah, that was basically the pivot. And then I went and got my master's in English, and it was interesting being in Idaho. I think I needed to go to Idaho State University because the Christian college I went to, like Evangel, what we just talked about, no self-respecting program is going to look at a degree from one of these Christian colleges and be like, you should do a PhD here.
Right.
I knew I needed like some form of like academic legitimacy. Yeah. And Idaho State, it's not a great school.
But it was what you needed to get your foot in the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Went there. And then I think originally I was going to do a PhD in English. My English professors were like, do you want to be broke forever? I said, no. They said, do not do English as a PhD. And I think in my master's, I had started to write about the Key and Peele show. Because like English,
Which, yes. So when doing research on your academia and stuff, I found on your record like the different panels and discussions that you did. A lot of them were centered around Key and Peele, but a lot were talking about how being mixed race or mixed race identities are portrayed in media, which I'm assuming these were all like either spoken at panels or there's no like log of it online.
It's a mix because some of the presentations they're basically the starting point for some of the chapters in my dissertation. Right. Others, there's no written thing anywhere. It was just a thing I presented with slides. Yeah.
The reason why I ask, because they all sound, so like, for example, one is Mixed Men in Black Hoodies, Race and New Media in the Key and Peele Show. Yeah. Laughing between the color line comedy and mixed race in the Key and Peele Show. What's New in Negro Town, New Media Activism and Mixed Race Blackness. It's all stuff that like, and I'm sure, and we'll get into once we talk about the dissertation of like, not just race being portrayed in film, TV, comedy, whatever, but I think there's that element of mixed race, which already being mixed is such a complex thing, because you feel like, at least, so for example, with myself, my dad is black skinned Dominican, mom is white skinned Puerto Rican, but so already off the bat, being mixed race and being biracial, but then on top of it, adding the Latin flavor of Latinos can be literally as black as these Mexicans, and they'll be like, I'm not black. So then adding like for honestly majority of my life until honestly COVID, I denied my blackness for so long. Yeah. And then recently came to terms with my blackness, but then now going through what Drake went through when he had the blackface on. Am I black enough? Yeah. So it's like just that studying and analyzing not just blackness in media, but like how that mixed race and having dual identities and potentially not feeling like you belong in either is just like very interesting. And I can see why those then led into the actual dissertation that you did.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think at the time, this is more like my master's, maybe first year of my PhD. I was doing more mixed race stuff. A lot of academics, they call it me search, because it's just like, I want to know why I'm the way I am. And it's like, yeah, it can get a little annoying, but we all do it.
Right.
We all do it. And I think, to me, the interesting thing about mixed race identity was like, I was always aware and appreciate the conversations around personal identity.
Yeah.
But I think I always wanted to push it further and be like, what's political about these identities? Like, how does this ladder up to something more structural?
Right.
To where it's not just...
What is the systemic aspect to this? Yeah.
And I think something frustrating in a lot of mixed race research is people get purely hung up on me.
Right.
Like, how do I feel? Where do I fit? Which, again, valid questions.
Right.
And we all, and especially as a mixed race person, I'm navigating that stuff too.
Right.
But it's like, I don't want to even say his name. Logic.
For some reason, my brain thought you were going to say Sean King. No.
That's a whole... I mean... We could go there too,
but shout out to Logic who, listen, we all go through a Logic phase.
We did.
I went through mine. Shout out to Under Pressure, but we all go through a Logic phase. But yes, Logic.
Yeah, it was just like I wanted to so quickly move beyond that.
Right.
Of like, because sometimes the conversation really, especially with like mixed race black folks, like myself who are black and white, it's like too black for the white kids, too white for the black kids. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, let's valid again. We get to have those questions, but we gotta move to, I think, a more productive conversation.
Well, because I feel like a lot of that conversation ends up focusing on the wrong things, and often centers around, can I say the N-word or not? Which is valid,
sure,
because it's like but like at the same time, it's also like we're not going to get into it.
Okay, yeah.
But I feel like that's why a lot of those conversations are annoying.
Very annoying.
Because they're so focused on this one aspect about being biracial. And there's
a lot more here.
Right.
There's a lot more here. And it's like, so one example that's like connected to my research is in the 90s, there was this thing called the multiracial movement. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Basically, it was a big push to get another box on the census. Like, at the time, people could only check one racial category.
Right.
And there was this big shift, like, you should be able to check more than one box.
Right.
Which, on its own, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, let people identify as they want to. But the people, like, basically spearheading this movement, all white mothers of multiracial black children. And you know which politician was co-signing this movement? Newt Gingrich. Yes, the conservative Republican Newt Gingrich was like, we need more boxes on the census. Anytime you're pushing for something political,
hold on.
Newt Gingrich is co-signing, take a second look. Something's
also,
off.
I feel like, I don't trust Newt, because I feel like Newt was just trying to be like, I need to know who the liars are. Yeah. I need to know who the white passings are.
Yeah.
That's Newt. Wow.
Yeah, Newt Gingrich. And it was interesting because it's like in that moment you recognize racial identity, and this is something I say like often in my research. Racial identity is never just about personal identity. Right. It's always about power. Yeah. It's always about power and power structures. Right. And
hence why there's so much tension with biracialness, and probably go back to the whole N-word thing, why that's a whole issue, because it's like you want to claim black when it's advantageous for you, but the second you can like embrace your whiteness, that's where you want to push away, which is like, I feel like, not to create division, if you're white passing biracial, like, that's an issue for you, but for people like us, people look at us and know you, like, you may be mixed, but you're black.
Yeah.
Like, you're
not a white dude walking around.
Right.
Yeah. And this is, I don't know, it's interesting because I feel like, especially with like the distancing thing, this is something I've tried to really, I don't know, tease out in my research of like, there is anti-blackness within mixed raceness.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing where sometimes I think biracial people are like, how? That's part of me.
Right.
Like, especially mixed race people with some sort of black heritage.
Yeah.
They're like, I could never. And it's like, you could.
Right.
You could. And that's, I think, the conversations I'm more interested in, where it's like, how can mixed race identity sometimes facilitate anti-blackness?
Right. Like
that happens.
I would say an example is like, so for myself, I've been growing my hair out, which thank you for the shampoo and products recommendation. The curls are curling for me.
I see.
But like growing my hair out, I've always had short hair. And I've always, like, I've done fades and shit.
Yeah.
But it was always short. And I had an afro when I was younger. And I didn't like it. And then from 2015, 2016, I grew my hair out like this, but it was more like a mohawk back, like when Usher had like the mohawk kind of thing. I was
there with you.
And I liked it at the time, but I decided to cut it because I was like, I was noticing like when being on the dating apps, I was getting less matches with the bigger hair.
Oh, interesting.
And right now, growing my hair out has basically been like, yes, like me being like, I want something new on board. But also it's become, the more I've grown it out, it's become this almost spiritual journey of actually embracing my, like the blackness of having my hair out and having it look like this rather than the short hair. Nothing against short hair. I'm not saying anything about it.
Yeah.
But it is more safe for the whites.
Valid. Yeah.
So having hair like this is it's very much allowed me to feel like I'm and the reason why I bring it up is because it's like, yeah, like I would be gung ho about black shit, but I would still catch myself presenting myself in a way that was like safe and digestible for white people.
Yeah.
So me having my hair grow out is more of like, nah, be who you want to be.
Sure.
And like, just let yourself be you. And whoever flocks to you is going to flock to the real you.
No, that's honestly, it's kind of beautiful.
Thank you.
I'll say it. That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Because I know hair texture is interesting. I think about this. Like, my hair is crazy long. I mean, it's like in a bun right now. But when my hair is out, it's like down to here, super curly. And I've noticed like hair texture it's such an indicator for people.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a thing that you're going to gravitate to. Like, if I was bald right now, I don't know if I would say the N-word.
Fair.
I don't know.
Fair.
And it's winter. I'm a little pasty.
That's not even like a light skin thing. That's just like too many bad people who have been bald and done some shit that like you gotta be like Rose. You gotta be Ricky Rose. You gotta be Joe Budden.
And
if you're gonna be bald and just dropping it.
It's just not me. But I don't know. It's interesting like hearing you talk about kind of your relationship to blackness and what it's been. Because I think as my research has evolved, it's become less about mixed race identity in particular and more about how we draw the boundaries around blackness.
Right.
Like, who's deciding what's black and what's not black?
Right.
What gets folded into blackness at certain times? What gets pushed out at certain times?
Right.
And I think that's where the research, like, kind of shifted from more just focused on mixed race identity to this broader question of, like, these competing claims on blackness from different vantage points.
Right.
And that includes mixed race identity.
Right.
Like, there's a chapter in my dissertation still about mixed race identity.
Right.
But I think as it evolved, it became more about different, like, socio-political moments, different technologies that get introduced, streaming platform eras, like, all these different factors that basically are like, blackness is this.
Right.
And then another thing is like, actually, blackness is this. And now we're all like, wait, some of this shit is clashing.
Right.
Some of it's complementary, but it's always shifting. And I think that's the weird part about blackness is like, I mean, as weird as it sounds, it's hard to pin it down and define it.
Right. Well, especially because we have to stop looking at blackness as like this like set in stone race thing and rather look at it what it is, which is a diaspora.
Yeah.
Blackness is so diverse and spread out, but because of the systemic oppression, systemic like the system
the systemic system.
the systemic system that has such put it every racial identity in a box.
Yeah.
Because like people of Asian descent in those cultures, same thing.
Yeah.
They go through the same stuff.
For sure.
Latin America, same thing, where it's like for example, with Latin and Hispanic cultures, is very much like, for myself, I'm Latin on paper, but I don't feel Latin at all because I don't speak Spanish.
Sure.
But when I'm put in that box, it's almost like when I show up in those spaces, I'm like, I don't feel like I belong here because I don't speak the language. But they're like, well, but you fit in this box, so you have to be. When you say you're something, you have to look and sound a certain way, and I feel like Blackness is the same. But all of this is actually a great time to transition to, because I want to make sure we get to talk about it.
Sure.
Your actual dissertation itself is called "The Algorithm Knows I'm Black from Users to Subjects," and essentially it's sparked from how it was noticed and it became a trend online of Black people noticing that Netflix was changing the promotional art of content to show Black characters to Black users. And you address this in your dissertation where at first it's like, well, that's not bad because I want to consume Black art. I want to consume Black entertainment. But how it became an issue was that it was showing movies and TV with the covers being Black characters, and those Black characters were in the movie for like 10 minutes.
Yes.
So it's
sometimes less, to be honest.
Sometimes less.
Yeah.
And it's like, sure, cool that these Black people got to have some sort of visual reputation, but then it's also like, but you just lied to me and made me think that Pride and Prejudice got some homeboys in it. And so I guess like, and then so basically you go through how all of these different tech companies are essentially now becoming the figures that are deciding what racial identity is starting to look like, and as well as how that plays into what content you're consuming and what content you're searching and what content you basically are led into believing what you're looking for, and why that sure could be a good thing in some areas, but why it could be a bad thing in other areas. How did you land on this was actually what you wanted to cover? And what was that journey like going through the research and stuff, and ultimately like through this dissertation, did it change how you felt about things? And like overall, I know probably the answer is obviously yes, but like what was like a real big takeaway that caused you to really change just your viewpoint on all of this?
So I think a quick thing. So the algorithm knows I'm Black is a chapter within the dissertation.
Okay.
The actual dissertation is called, I'm actually really proud of the title. It's called "Whose Black Is It Anyway?"
Okay. I like that. That's good. That's good.
But the algorithm knows I'm Black. This is my one academic published article.
Okay.
Which is pretty cool. Just a quick side thing. It's been cited now by like other academic researchers.
Hell yeah.
5 times.
Hell yeah.
Which I'm not gonna lie, I get those notifications. I'm like, I'm really that guy.
Well, because that's the academic version of like posting a joke clip and then seeing comics share it.
Comics you respect.
Yeah. That's where you're like, oh shit, okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's a good
feeling.
It's a good, because comics, we don't really share other comic shit.
Nah.
And it's not even on some personal shit, or not even that we don't think each other is good. It's just honestly like not even, like for example with myself, I'll see so many people post jokes, I'm like, that's good. But I just don't think.
I'll like it.
I'll like it.
Yeah,
I'll comment on it. But the sharing, but for like when I share one, I'm like, people need
to know this,
which is kind of fucked up, because then you're basically saying the people don't need to see the other shit. They don't need to see the other shit.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. So that's awesome. That 5 times has been cited.
And it's, again, that's not like a huge amount. Like there's some like academic famous articles, fucking 1,000 citations.
Okay, but that's the same thing with joke clips, where there's joke clips that are shared so many times. That doesn't mean that it's better or it invalidates the ones that aren't as much.
Yeah, so that's been cool, of like just seeing the validation. I mean, even getting an article published, like going through the peer review process is what they call it. That in and of itself was like, I'm not gonna lie, it was a good accomplishment. I was proud of myself. Like, I really published some shit.
Yeah.
And then some of my homies who are professors now assign my articles to their students, and I'm like,
hell yeah,
all right, this is cool.
That
like,
is really cool.
I'm fucking with this. But yeah, I think this article was my first really step into thinking about technology and Blackness.
Right.
I think before, like with the Key and Peele stuff, it really was about television and mixed race identity and Blackness. And like I talked a little bit about Key and Peele being on YouTube and kind of the formatting, but technology was not basically like a major through line in the research. And then when this thing happened, what you just gave the breakdown of, when like all these black users on Twitter were like, yo, something's off. Because I'm watching whatever, The Office, and Stanley is taking up the entire screen. And shout out to Stanley, but The Office is not about Stanley.
Right.
Yeah, and so it really like, I think it pushed me to ask, and this was like my academic question, is like, what does it mean to be black in an algorithmically curated space?
Right.
Which is a mouthful.
Right.
But it's basically like, as algorithms become more just here and in our faces and are recommending things, how, like, where does Blackness fit into that?
Right.
And I think when thinking about a company like Netflix, because they responded to all of this, and they were like, listen, we don't, not my article, but just the moment in general.
Okay.
They were like, listen, we don't know shit about users. We don't know like race, gender, you know, but it's like,
Which is bullshit.
I'm like, they
Which
say
is-
that, but I just,
Which is bullshit.
I know. When any tech company says like, we don't know, I'm like,
Yeah.
come on. But anyway, Netflix is basically putting out these statements. We don't know anything. But at the same time, even let's
Netflix, if you do hear this, I am kidding. I would love to do any of your shows.
same.
Please don't hold this against me.
Netflix is a joke. Next year we could make it happen. I don't know. But it is interesting because Netflix, even if we give them that, let's say, and I believe to some extent they didn't design an algorithm that was like, we're gonna find the black people.
Right.
But it's like, regardless of that, algorithms are going to make decisions about clustering groups of people together. And so even if you don't basically have race as a variable in your system, guess what? Race is still going to present itself in the output. And I think that's where a lot of this research got really interesting to me, because it was like, and I think I knew this, but doing this research really solidified technology is not neutral.
Yeah.
And I think this is like a Silicon Valley, like, fucking, they shout it from the rooftops, like, technology, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just here.
Right.
And if we being fucking for real, it's not just here.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we're even starting to see that with AI now, with how we are now having to teach AI how to not be racist.
Yes.
Where that, like, I think for the longest time, I did think technology is neutral. It's just a tool.
Right.
And a tool doesn't have opinions. But then now I feel like ever since all of the protests with Black Lives Matter, that started to shine the light on, these social media companies, if you're talking stuff that they don't want you to be telling people, they can just very easily shadow ban you. Instead of, they can't just ban you. That's a violation of the First Amendment. The first, but then they can shadow ban you where you're basically silenced, but not silenced. And now with AI, so many companies that are trying to do AI and shit are now having to set those guardrails of like for example, that like animated recreation of Seinfeld, where it was written by AI and like within days had an anti-Semitic joke.
Oh yeah.
Which is efficient. That in a week,
they said,
which the AI was like, we got to get to. This is in the first. This is in the first.
They got to that quick,
but it's proof that it's like, it's just what you said, where it's not neutral. And now I feel like as we're at the beginning stages of a society realizing that, where it's like, well, fuck, like how do you make it neutral, but continue with how you were talking about where it's not neutral.
Yeah, and so I think though, even despite all of that, there's like this term that some academics use. They call it like a techno-pessimist, and that's basically, this is the worst fucking thing in the world. It's gonna kill us all, and I'm not there. Right. Like, there's obviously still a lot of utility. To tech and even AI. Like,
but there are great uses to AI, but unfortunately, we're seeing too much of it being used to basically cut down on the need to pay people for their services and take the shortcuts when it's just like, or you could just pay an artist to do some shit. So
exactly.
yeah, exactly.
It like one of the examples I love to give is there was this basically I forget what it was called. It was called like a face depixelizer or something like that. Basically, it was actually the idea is cool. You can take a picture that's really pixelated and you can basically make it clear.
Oh,
and
yeah.
how
Your
they-
article references this about how there was the pixelized image of Obama.
Yes.
And then when it depixelized it, it made him white.
Yeah, which is just such a perfect example of like, whoa, this is a really cool thing, and images that were fuzzy.
Right.
Basically, they did like a machine learning thing where they taught it to pixelate something.
Right.
And then they're like, now just reverse it.
Right.
And once it learned how to do that, now it can give them a pixelated image.
Right.
Reverses it. Sounds cool in theory. And then you got Obama becoming white. It's like, oh, okay. I see what's happening. So I don't know. It's interesting because I think there still needs to be, and there are a lot of people calling out this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think I was one of them with this article. But I also appreciate the people who aren't just good at the critique, but now can make some actual recommendations.
Right.
Of like, this is what we can do.
Right.
And those are the people like what I think we need, like the actual programmers, coders, people basically reading shit like this.
Right.
And like just being more conscious of, because it's so easy to buy into like the Silicon Valley like ideology of like innovation and progress above all else.
Right.
And if some shit gets fucked up along the way, like end result, still worth it.
Right.
It's like, like let's pause for a second. Yeah.
That's a very good point because it's like I feel like tech and especially AI, but tech in general is becoming all right. We went to the moon, and going to Mars is going to take a minute, but we still, as a society, as a white society, need to conquest and colonize something new.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where technology is coming in, where they're trying to create these virtual worlds like the metaverse, or like trying to do all of this stuff with AI, even though it's like, yo, everyone, like we saw Terminator, like put some guardrails, and they're like, no, we need to have no guardrails and we need to go forward. So yeah, it's a very interesting point where it's like that Silicon Valley mindset of progress behind all progress in the sense of just all of these people want to be the first.
Right.
To do something without even thinking about what the ramifications could be.
Yeah. And I think that's something that my dissertation was very aware of. But at the same time, I wasn't solely focused on just the negative aspects of technology and race and how those things intersect. Like one of my chapters was about did you ever see Watchmen on HBO?
Yes. Loved it.
With Regina King.
Yes. I saw the movie, saw the TV show, read the graphic novel, love it all.
10 out of 10 show. One of my favorite shows I've watched in the last...
Honestly, damn near perfect, if not perfect.
Damn near perfect. And I wrote a chapter about Watchmen, and that chapter was more like a celebration might be a strong word, but kind of like a celebration of blackness and technology. And like, it was, I don't know if you've heard the term Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
And it was like definitely, I wouldn't call Watchmen an Afrofuturist show, but there were elements of Afrofuturism in it. Of like looking ahead to a future of blackness, not solely rooted in trauma, pain, the haunting of slavery, even though the show addressed those issues.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I mean, you watched it. When we get to the end, I feel like blackness is really like celebrated.
Yeah.
And beautiful. And there's like healing and reconciliation. And it's like, oh, we not just thinking about the history of slavery for 10 episodes in a row.
Right.
And that's what I really appreciated about the show was it really, there was like this really cool intersection of blackness, technology, history, superhero nerd shit. Like it just, and even like Regina King at the end, basically inheriting the power of Dr. Manhattan. Was what a fucking way to end the show. Man.
Like God is black now. Yes. Like it's just
it was.
And it's also just even the fact that they made Dr. Manhattan black in the first place is like he was a white man in the graphic novel. So the fact that they changed it, but changed it in a way where it was not, and fucking Hollywood, listen up. This is how you do diversity in media without making it so obvious that you're just checking the box. Where in the show, it made sense that Dr. Manhattan's human form was black.
Yes.
And So I guess one thing I want to ask is, because obviously the dissertation is long, the article is long. So to try to recap the whole thing is not able to be done in an hour.
Sure.
But I guess what it like, because you obviously what I had said was just a chapter. Clearly, I don't know how dissertations work. I was like, I haven't read your whole dissertation. You're like, yeah, of course not. It's like over 100 pages. I was like, no, this one looks pretty. Oh, it's because it's not the whole thing. Yeah. But I do think, at least to kind of pinpoint, even though there's so many different parts of it, to pinpoint it on this whole algorithm thing, because I think right now algorithms have basically plagued us all.
Yeah.
Now, like with TikTok, where you're pretty much shoved in a box. And at first, that's always been kind of viewed from like interest-wise, you're put in a box.
Yeah.
But to think, hey, your identity is now being put in a box, and how limiting that can be, like you analyze that. What is like the big takeaway that if someone was like, I don't have internet, I can't read your article, I can't read your dissertation, what's like the big takeaway of why people should give a fuck about this?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it's funny because this is the kind of question my committee asked me. Like after dissertation defense, they're like, why should we care?
Right.
And I think for me, my research is always rooted in like, if you care about black shit, black people, black politics, black people having rights, like my research is important, because I think what it's doing is it's really giving us like, a blueprint's too strong, but basically mapping out like why racial identity needs to keep being talked about. And I think we're in a moment where it's like, obviously lots of people are sick of talking about race.
Right.
But it's like, to me, race is still like the foundational principle that like we do everything from.
Right.
Make laws, make policy, make TV shows, do whatever. And I think my dissertation is really taken to task like, this is how blackness shows up. This is how blackness gets basically formed and presented to us. And there are consequences for how blackness is presented to us.
Right.
Material consequences, personal consequences, political consequences. And I think what I say about my dissertation is, even though it's about blackness, the framework I'm using is really about race in general.
Yeah.
And I think I really want to ground what I do in thinking about who's claiming what on what different racial identities.
Right.
And I think, if you're a person who cares about the state of the world, period, you got to be concerned with racial identity.
Right.
And I think my dissertation is addressing those questions of why should we still care about race right now?
Right.
Here's why. Because it has real consequences for the way we think, the way we act, the way we make policy. And entertainment and popular culture is something that I take seriously. As much as I can like kiki and laugh about it, popular culture is still such a ground where we fight about ideology.
Yeah.
And I think that's another big thing of my dissertation is popular culture matters.
Right.
And if you think you're just watching TV and just getting a laugh off.
No, it's what educates us about cultures we don't have the opportunity to meet. Like, it's like how, like, for example, when you're growing up in an area that doesn't have, like, for example, any Asian people, whatever you see on TV is going to educate you on what Asian people are like.
You're going to internalize that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're going to, and then either if you're watching the right stuff that's representing those cultures well, you're going to be like, okay, I have a okay understanding, but obviously I'm not going to know until I meet people. And even then, you still have to build that understanding of they're not a monolith. So Joe is not a representation of all Japanese people or Korean people, or et cetera, et cetera. Or even like the easiest example is the news. Like oftentimes the news is what educates us about an entire group of people.
Sure.
So like, pop culture is important because it is the source of either love for a group of people, a hatred for a group of people, or a mockery.
Yeah.
Or embrace.
Yeah. And I think like media industries in general, I think, and again, this is another thing my dissertation does, is really track over time the relationship that different media industries have to blackness.
Right.
And how sometimes blackness is like, yo, this is lucrative as fuck. And you got to look at like, why in this moment? Like, I don't know, like we probably running close on time, but like the Cosby Show was something I talked about in my first chapter.
Right.
Of like, why was the Cosby Show so popular? And it was like in the moment of like the height of like Reagan and Reaganism, there needed to be a show that showed people black people can be doctors.
Right.
Black people can be lawyers.
Right.
What a positive image of blackness
Right.
we're seeing. These black folks not too bad.
To not only show them not struggling,
Yeah.
but it was like they were in a family setting that we've only seen in white families.
Exactly.
Which is they are not only well educated, but they have great jobs. Both of the parents are in the household.
Yep.
All of the kids are overall good kids, like
Yeah.
not really getting to deep trouble. And then on top of it, they're financially great.
Yeah.
They have a nice house. They're nice, respected neighbors. And it was like, I mean, obviously Cosby doing what he did is fucked up for a numerous list of reasons.
Yeah.
But that's one where it was like, that was such we had that when we didn't really have that.
Sure.
And then now it has this stain on it. Like
does.
for example, Cosby Show was how my dad, ultra religious, we don't really bond because we're so different. But Cosby Show was the one thing where I could watch it with him and not hear a lecture about how sinful shit is. And then ever since that shit, I'm like, I legit can't. There's like some things I can't separate the art from the artist, and that's one where I'm like, nah, bro, I can't.
I get it. Yeah, Cosby Show was just a weird one because like real quick, the flip side to that coin was there was these researchers, these professors in the 90s that did a study. Basically, when they talked to white people about the Cosby Show, white people were like, race relations in America are better because of the Cosby Show. And that's the other side of that coin, right? Where it's like, this is great representation. But then what happens after the Cosby Show ends? LA riots, Rodney King, mass incarceration. So it's like, oh. And
well, it's like how fucking like a movie will like to kind of just help kind of get this point across to apply it to a different culture. A movie coming out that has predominantly Asian people in it, and you would think race relations with Asians is solved.
We did it.
And then in COVID, just all of these attacks against older Asian people. So it's like the same thing where it's like, just because you gave us Black Panther doesn't mean shit's cool.
Yes.
Like, there's shit's still fucked.
Yeah.
But like, thanks. Like, thank you for Black Panther.
I
Like,
still watched
it was lit. It was great. I love the
Loved it.
soundtrack. It's still great. I still have admittedly seen the second one, but that's because
You're
it's
good.
almost 3 hours.
Okay.
And just anytime a movie's 2 hours or over, I'm like, fucking, I don't want to watch it. But anyway, yeah, continue.
Yeah, so that's all I was going to say was like, it's, again, to ask me of like why my research matters, is because these representations we get, they don't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
Right? You don't get a Cosby Show or a Black Panther just because some media executives were like, you know what we need? Black Panther. It's like there's so many things happening that contribute to why we get Black Panther when we get it. And I think that's like, it's like a media literacy thing of like, I think people in general, you're a better consumer of art, media, whatever, when you understand there's a lot of shit happening that produces this thing that I'm watching.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing that we should all be considering all the time.
Because just like you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not understanding what you're trying to get to, but like the tie back to what you were talking about with technology is not neutral, and now technology being that driving force for so much innovation, not just in media but in general, but especially in media, where if we're allowing this thing to tell stories of racial identity, to curate what we see and hear about racial identity, and on top of it, that tool is not neutral, we can't just let it go unchecked.
Exactly.
Because then it could frame a racial identity in a way that is very hurtful, not just on my feelings, but also on a systemic level, as we've seen with during the protests, social media companies shadow banning activist accounts and shit like that. Yeah. Because like, yes, the Netflix thing, I'm sure to the average person is like, yeah, that sounds like annoying, but like,
who cares?
With everything else that's going on in the world, should I really care about Netflix showing me Black people on the posters or not? And it's like, sure, if you look at everything else that's going on in the world, it may not seem like this is that big of a deal or a deal. But your whole article and dissertation is, correct me if I'm wrong, is trying to argue that this is a symptom
Yes.
of a much larger issue.
100%.
So I guess like one thing often when I hear like things like this is like, cool, that sucks, or like that's okay. Like now I'm aware of the issue, but like, what can I do about it? Or how does this actually apply to my day to day? Like now we have identified the problem, but like, how can people in their day to day actually try to combat stuff like this? Have we even reached that point where we can?
It's tough because I think, to make an example, it's kind of like climate change, right? They tell you don't use plastic straws,
Right.
Like do these like individual things. At the end of the day, me and you not using plastic straws, the drop that's going to make in the bucket
Right.
is almost nothing, which is
Right.
a little depressing to hear. I think, so I think that's like one example that pops in my head right away. I think one thing though is like I really appreciate, Twitter not as much anymore since it became X, but I think the fact that black users on Twitter were complaining about this and it snowballed into something bigger.
Right.
These are the moments when I'm like, people's collective voice on different platforms can still make shit happen.
Right.
And this is like, I think for me as like an active like person on TikTok, on Twitter, like when I see people like get on a trend and pointing some shit out, it matters.
Right.
And that thing will snowball enough until people have to take notice and there'll be some accountability.
Right.
And I think that's one thing where like one of my advisors, he basically wrote a book about Black Twitter. And he talks about Black Twitter as not just a space of like joy and fun and happiness, but also a place where it's like, yo, we can check shit.
Yeah.
We can like check some people and be like, yo, what the fuck is this happening right now?
Right.
And I think that's one thing that I appreciate. Because again, I'm not like completely negative towards technology, but these are the moments where like social media platforms and the way that people can collectively have a voice and say some shit, that still matters.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful thing when I
Yeah.
see that happening.
Real
Yeah.
quick, Blake, how much time do we have left?
1 minute.
1 minute? Oh shit. Okay. Okay. I was gonna ask another question, but then we gotta wrap it up. Thank you so much
For sure.
for coming in. There's just so much in your dissertation that's so interesting, and even just the article that I read, but just like in general, it's like from how you cover so much. I know like we only just scratched the surface. So I wish we had more time where we can dig in even more. But I still think very much everything that we talked about was amazing. If people like the things you said and the way you said it, can they follow you online? And if so, how should they go about that?
For sure. So mostly I'm on Instagram and TikTok these days. It's just Danny.Meyerend, Meyerend.
And then if people want to read the article that comes from that is part of your dissertation, what will be the best way for people to actually find that?
So actually, there's a link in my Instagram bio, and it's just the algorithm knows I'm black.
Okay.
You'll find it there. And that one is not behind a paywall.
Okay.
That's also some other bullshit that academia does. They make you pay to read research, which is like, yo, just let people have this. But it's in my bio. You can read the free version.
If someone wanted to read your actual full dissertation, like they want to do that, can they actually do that?
They could.
Okay.
I think if you if you basically Google my name, University of Michigan, it'll be in like the University of Michigan like digital archives.
Okay.
It'll be up there.
Okay.
And you can find it.
Perfect. Danny, thank you so fucking much for coming on the pod. This was absolutely amazing. We'll definitely have to have you back because I feel like we can, especially both of us having religious backgrounds, there's so much that we can talk about. Thank you so much. The last thing, and then we're going to head out, is this is the ending segment that I have all of the guests do called I'm going to leave you with this. Basically where you're going to say, hi, my name is, and you say your name.
Okay.
And I'm going to leave you with this, and it's just whatever you want. Whether it's you want to recap something we talked about, or whether it's something we didn't get to talk about that you just want to really quickly, like in a statement or two, be like this, and that. It's homework you want to assign, anything, or even just like, yo, I like booties. Like just something like that. Like, whatever it is just like in a quick, whatever you want to say, and then we head out. So once again, it's hi, my name is Danny, and I'm gonna leave you with this. So
Okay.
the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, my name is Danny. I'll leave you with this.
Oh, actually, sorry. Say it into the camera.
Say it to the camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Danny. I'll leave you with this. Read my article.
Short and simple, baby. Thank you so much for listening to the third episode of Very Interesting. One more time, please follow Danny on all social platforms. Check out his dissertation if you got the time, or read the article if you're like me and didn't have the time. But thank you so much for coming on. I'll catch you next week, ladies and gentlemen, and y'all have a good night.